Hi English 345 students, I hope all is going well and that you enjoyed learning a little bit about the history of English in the last presentation that I sent to you. So today's presentation that I'll send to you in a couple of installments is all about language variation and change. So in the beginning of this module, you looked at how languages evolve in the TED Ed video. You took the quiz, hopefully by now. Then you learned a little bit about the history of our native language, the native language of most of the students in the class, the history of English. And then today we're going to be taking a look at language change from different points of view. We're kind of going to get into the sociolinguistic perspectives, various perspectives of that. So when we go into course modules, again, we're going to go to the Module 6 folder. And there you will find the new presentation uploaded, Module 6 Language Variation and Change. So you can find it there. I've actually got it already open and ready to go on my screen. And so some parts of this presentation, I will kind of walk you through it. Other parts will be more independent sorts of exercises. Watching some short videos about different language varieties and being able to answer some questions about them. And that will help you to prepare for the next quiz coming up, which is Quiz 6. And that I would be opening to you after this coming week. So this week you don't have any quiz or any application that you have to work on. The application 6 exercise is due by Monday the 6th. And then I'll be opening Quiz 6 on that day, and you'll have a couple of days to work on that. Okay, so let's just dive right in. All right, so language variation. As we learned at the beginning of the semester, we talked a lot about the difference between descriptive and prescriptive linguistics. Linguists generally are coming from the descriptive approach, so they believe that all languages and all varieties of languages are equal in terms of value and complexity. And we can include dialects in that group too, so varieties of languages would refer to dialects. So if we're talking about dialectal diversity in English, we all speak English. Everybody in the United States understands each other for the most part. We can go to different regions and we can talk to different people and we might notice some differences or some different vocabulary. I definitely noticed that when I first moved from the Midwest to the South. I'm sure many of you have noticed that traveling to other places in the United States. We do have some differences. So why do some of those differences exist? As you learned in the How Languages Evolve video, geography is a factor. People live in different areas. It depends on how often they mix together. Nowadays, people travel so much more than they might have in the past. So that's probably ironed out some of those differences. We don't notice as much because we're connected across long distances through technology, through travel. These days, unfortunately, with all the situation we're in with the coronavirus, of course, we cannot connect with each other as much as in the past. And who knows, if this goes on for a long time, maybe it will even have some language effects. Hopefully it will be short, though. So geography, time. If you ever listen to like an old film strip from the 1950s, you definitely notice that people sound a little bit different. They have different pronunciations. It's kind of like a mid-Atlantic accent. They might sound a little bit American and almost a little bit British. Race and ethnicity. So depending on what ethnic group you belong to or what your racial background is, that might affect the language that you speak. Your social class might even have an impact on the way you speak. So all these factors work together to influence our speaking. And as we talked about at the beginning of the semester, there are definitely judgments attached to some of the ways people speak. When we watch the video of the woman who did all the different American accents, we had different impressions about her based on the way she was speaking, whether she was a New Yorker or a Midwesterner or a Southerner. We form assumptions about people sometimes, not always good ones. Okay, so some of the ways that language can change, one would be lexical and semantic change. So as you learned about in semantics, this is all about meaning. Lexicon is vocabulary. So some words are going to come and go, and old and new will coexist. So a word like cool has been around pretty much for decades. It's still relatively popular. Groovy maybe has even come back. It's probably had a bit of a resurgence. It would have been really popular back in the 70s when I was a little kid. And you might even hear people say it now just as a joke almost. Far out, rad, these are probably pretty old slang words. And we might say that slang marks membership in a culture. So if you use a certain set of words that only other people, maybe in your age group or your social group or whatever the group happens to be, if you share that vocabulary, it's marking your membership in that culture, that subculture. And I included just kind of a fun website to take a look at here about slang words from 2020. And I don't really know most of these, and that makes sense because, I'm not a Gen Zer, and I might not be using this vocabulary on a regular basis, but it's kind of fun to see what some of the new words are. So you can take a scroll through that to see if some of those words might be familiar to you as somebody who is a college student at this time. There's another link that I've got included here called the quotative like. We'll skip over that for just a second. We're going to come to that in another slide in just a few moments. But basically this refers to pretty much anytime you use the word like when you're having a conversation. Just think about, for now, how many times you say like when you have a conversation with somebody. It's a lot. It's a very, very common word in conversational English. Other words might be more permanent. So MP3 player didn't stick around that long because, of course, the technology changed. It became the iPod, and then, we use our smartphone to do all the same functions that we use those devices for in the past. We still download things. We still send tweets. That's probably not going anywhere anytime soon. And all those words were created because there was a need to do that for technology that's been developed in recent years. And interestingly, some words even shift meaning in usage. So silly actually had a different meaning in Shakespeare's time. I think it was more like innocent or naive, but now it has a little bit of a somewhat negative meaning. Terrible, I believe, had a positive meaning back in Shakespeare's day. Bad generally doesn't have a very positive meaning, but if you wanted to, take a couple of minutes to look at this video, Michael Jackson's song Bad, and you go to some of these parts a little bit later on and listen to the way he sings the song. Well, we'll get rid of our ad here, of course. And you can kind of see the image he's trying to portray in the video. He definitely looks pretty tough. Bad has probably got a positive meaning in this song. If we move a little further on. Bad probably doesn't have a very negative meaning when it comes to that song. So words can change meaning. Sick, this link goes to the Taylor Swift song. Let's see which one that was again. So it's the song Shake It Off. And at one point in the song, she uses the word sick to talk about this sick beat. So obviously that's got a positive meaning in that song. So a word that we normally would have had kind of a negative perception of in the past has changed to mean something positive, something good in the current time. And different varieties of English. If we compare American English to British English, we see definitely some different vocabulary words to refer to the same items. So crisps, we know them as chips in the United States. You can be wasted in the United States, but knackered in the UK. I always remember one time when I visited England to visit family of mine there, and my cousin's little boy was playing with a truck, like a little toy truck, and I called it a truck, and he laughed so hard at me because I called it a truck instead of a lorry, which is what it's called in British English. Or knock on wood for luck, we might say here in the United States. My mom, who is from Ireland, always says touch wood, and it means exactly the same thing. If you touch wood or knock on wood, you've got good luck for doing that. Another kind of interesting example we can look at of language change would be changes in the sound system. And one really great example of this, it kind of goes to points to my hometown area of the country, kind of the Midwest or going towards the Northeast. This probably applies a lot to like the New York State area, Buffalo, Chicago, like kind of northern cities around the Great Lakes. And it's this phenomenon called the Northern Cities Vowel Shift. And William Labov is the sociolinguist who came up with this theory of language change, of pronunciation change. His picture is right there. I'm going to take a quick trip over to the Wikipedia page about him. It's kind of an important person to know about in the field of linguistics. So he's an American linguist, widely regarded as the founder of the discipline of variationist sociolinguistics. So he's definitely a very influential figure in that field. He is a professor emeritus in the linguistics department at the University of Pennsylvania. So his research areas were sociolinguistics, language change, dialectology. So his main area was really looking at American dialects. He's retired now, but he was definitely a very big figure in that field. So he came up with this idea of the Northern Cities Vowel Shift. And if you click on the link here, it'll take you to a video where you can listen to a little bit of this. That one I'll let you listen to on your own, and I definitely encourage you to take a look at the video because it talks about what actually happens to the pronunciation of certain vowels. So if you've got sentences like she lives down the block, I gotta go to class, or I took 2 buses to school. So a word like block in certain northern cities, I guess if I went home tomorrow and back to Chicago, I might find myself even slipping into this pronunciation. Instead of saying block or even block, like some people might say, there's been this shift from pronouncing that sound as ah or aw to almost like ah. So she lives down the black. It's like a very kind of nasal vowel sound. So what's happened, if you can kind of see where my cursor is, the ah sound has shifted over to the ah sound. So all the other sounds kind of move over to take the place of the sounds that have shifted. It's called the crowded elevator analogy. So instead of saying I took 2 buses to school, that sound ah becomes aw, if you remember the IPA symbols for all of these vowel sounds. So it goes aw, ah, ah. So buses is going to become like bosses. And if you listen to the video about Northern Cities Vowel Shift, you can actually hear samples of people from the Buffalo, New York area who pronounce those vowels in that way. And I definitely grew up hearing people use those pronunciations too, especially on the south side of Chicago where I'm from. And so it's kind of an interesting phenomenon that over time, these kind of changes gradually take place and they, create these major shifts or language changes. Another area we can look at is grammar and morphology as far as language change goes. So if you were to hear somebody say something like he spoke real clear, we would hear people use that kind of structure all the time. But if we were following the rule book, it would be he spoke really clearly, right? We'd be using both adjectives to describe the way that he spoke. So is that okay? Is it not okay? It depends on which prescriptive rules you want to be following. Another term we can take a look at is idiolect. So that's the speech of each individual. Individuals have variations too. Some words that we've even heard kind of created in this way in recent times would be complexify. So taking an adjective like complex and then adding "ify" onto it to turn it into a verb. Or taking a word like conversation, a noun, and kind of backtracking it to turn it into a verb like conversate. And it's really interesting if you look at this entry in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, which we'll do very quickly here. The first thing that comes up is conversate a real word? So although scorned by many, conversate has been in regular use for over 200 years, which is pretty interesting because it seems like that was more of a modern creation. And as they tell us here, conversate has the power to upset a great many people. So if the hundreds of comments left by users of this dictionary under the words entry are any indication, so we know this as a back formation. So it's a type of word made by removing a portion of an existing word, such as the suffix. So we can actually see that escalate was formed by shortening escalator. I didn't know that before. Televise comes from television, donate from donation. Even liaise, which is a pretty common back formation these days too, comes from liaison. So that's another way that we might observe language change in action. And